Bitcoin continues to fall here. The Middle East conflict is simmering and moving into the next phase. We now have an emergency call between Donald Trump and Putin. Trump tells Putin the situation is very alarming, and we have new attacks. Energy infrastructure has now officially become a target. We now have an Iranian oil facility with a production outage of 12 million cubic meters per day. If energy infrastructure is attacked here, it also means higher inflation and even more uncertainty. But it also seems like there's insider trading going on, because apparently there were leaks and people knew about these attacks in advance and timed their actions accordingly. Yes, the uncertainty continues to be bad for the financial markets, but Bitcoin is still holding up relatively well. We also have more positive news, like JP Morgan releasing a very, very positive report. We have new Bitcoin treasury companies, but we also have the next warning from Bloomberg, who are saying that Bitcoin could trigger a recession. We have long-term holders who are buying now, and short-term panic sellers, unfortunately, the so-called lettuce traders. Now let's take a look at the current market situation, including what's happening in the Middle East and how that's impacting Bitcoin, and what comes next. But first, go ahead and drop a like below for peace. It's really, really important right now, especially for peace, but also for Bitcoin and for freedom. And if you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and hit that subscribe button below so these videos reach even more people, because you really shouldn't be panicking right now. I've also seen a lot of people saying, hey, awesome, I bought more, and so on. We can see it too. Bitcoin isn't crashing to the bottom. Of course, we're correcting. Of course, we're dropping a few percentage points. Sure, we're moving sideways. And of course, we're not seeing those Valhalla candles just yet. But I'd still say, all things considered, even though we're dropping again today, Bitcoin is really holding up well here. We can also see here that even though Bitcoin corrected this week, the Bitcoin ETFs have absorbed 1.37 billion in capital. This brings the cumulative inflows since approval to almost $45.6 billion. That's a new all-time high, with the previous record on May 28, 2025, at 45.31 billion. You can see it here as well, it just keeps going up. Sure, there are small outflows from time to time, but overall, it's only moving in one direction. And that's exactly what you need to take away for the Bitcoin price. In the long run, there's always just one direction here. And that's also really, really interesting, especially if we take a look here. And we'll talk about the Middle East conflict in a moment, too. Here we have Google Trends now, and it's just incredible when you take a look at it. Here, the search interest has returned to the level it was at when the price was $16,000. Retail investors still aren't paying any attention to it. Just take a look at this. We're basically at the same level we were at when Bitcoin was 16,000, and now we're over 100,000, and nobody cares anymore. You can also see it in the YouTube videos, at least to some extent. There are fewer clicks now. There were times during the bear market when people watched more YouTube videos, Bitcoin videos, than they do now in the bull market. Sure, it's partly the summer slump and so on, but it's still pretty crazy. On the one hand, this shows just how much potential there still is for growth. On the other hand, unfortunately, it also shows that people just have the wrong focus. They simply aren't interested in building wealth. They just want to keep running in their little hamster wheel, whatever that may be. And this is also illustrated by the following chart here. Long-term Bitcoin holders are entering heavy accumulation mode. So right now, long-term holders are buying up massively. People who have held their Bitcoin for over a year, or however long-term holder is defined here. It's always defined a little differently. Some say it's a year, others say half a year. There are different definitions for it. A few people have also told me that I shouldn't be so hard on the bratwurst eaters. Of course, that's just meant symbolically when I say things like, hey, the bratwurst guy or schnitzel Peter or whatever, they just don't get it. Sure, go ahead and have a bratwurst or a schnitzel. That's all good. But just don't blow all your money on bratwurst. Yesterday, someone jokingly commented below, I sold all my Bitcoin and just bought bratwurst with it. Obviously, that's not exactly the smartest financial decision. But a lot of people really seem to be at the level where they basically blow all their money on bratwursts and then later wonder, hey, why do I have nothing left at the end of the day? Of course, you need to put your money into assets that hold value, not blow it all on bratwursts. Like I said, 1 or 2 bratwursts, fine, but that's enough. But I mean, who am I here? Of course, do whatever you want. For all I care, throw all your money into bratwursts with leverage, with 10 times leverage. Now let's take a look at the conflict situation. We just had the news yesterday. Or actually just a few hours ago. According to reports, Iran is planning attacks on US bases in the Middle East, and the price has already, reacted a bit to that. Of course, that means more uncertainty. Then, just a few minutes ago, we had reports from Iranian media that Israel attacked energy facilities in Iran, causing a fire at the South Pars gas field. Oil prices will probably skyrocket, so oil is going to the moon. We can see that Bitcoin isn't reacting that strongly yet, but now exactly what I told you in the last or second to last video is happening. It's just that now it's the weekend, and on the weekend, only Bitcoin is being traded here. That means if there are escalations, if there are conflicts, if we move into the next phase of escalation, Bitcoin will react the most in terms of price, because the stock markets are closed. What else can you trade if you start to panic, if you need cash, and so on? So basically, the only thing you can do here is go into Bitcoin, and you can easily liquidate Bitcoin within seconds. That's the big advantage. But it also means that during such times, there's often increased volatility here. For example, the nuclear talks with the USA that were supposed to take place tomorrow with Iran have now been cancelled. So that also points to further escalation. Trump also pressured Iran to make a nuclear deal before everything basically gets reduced to rubble. And apparently, now these negotiations aren't happening. Walter Bloomberg also posted, Oman says the Iran and US talks scheduled for Sunday will not take place. Then we also had an emergency call here. Putin is now calling Donald Trump for a phone conversation. Trump and Putin are discussing the escalation here. So we actually have emergency negotiations going on here. The Kremlin also posted. Trump told Putin that US negotiators are ready to resume work with Iranian representatives. So apparently they discussed that there are indeed efforts to negotiate here. Trump told Putin, the situation in the Middle East is very alarming. So there is a very, very high state of alert. We are absolutely in alarm mode here. And for that, as I said, Bitcoin is actually still holding up pretty well. And then there were also these attacks. Iran's South Pars gas fields output at one platform halted. A gas refinery has now been set on fire here. And as we can see, oil is just completely escalating. Here are the forecasts. It will probably rise to almost $100 potentially. Right now, it's not quite at $100, but a little below that. And that also means that the entire supply chains become even more difficult during international conflicts. This leads to rising prices, higher inflation, and so on. So this is not good for anyone. And I don't want to hear any comments like, yeah, but you have to do this and that. And then there are some who say, okay, you have to attack. And others who say, no, you absolutely must not attack. I don't want to take sides here at all. I'm always on the side of the people. And if we take a look, 99.9% of people don't want to go around bashing each other's heads in. As Daniel E. Ganser always puts it so nicely, we are all one human family. And then there's that 1% of people who, through manipulation, media manipulation, somehow get others to start bashing each other's heads in. But in reality, we don't want to bash each other's heads in. And even the people who do, compared to the total world population, are such a tiny minority. And I'm always on the side of the people here. This isn't about, or to put it better, every human life lost here is, in my opinion, one too many. And yes, I think it's a shame what's happening here. But unfortunately, that's just how it is. But it's also part of it. When we're looking at Bitcoin here, that we have to consider global events. And I just can't skip over things like new conflict zones emerging. And something I almost forgot to mention, apparently there was insider trading here. So there were traders who bought massive shares on Polymarket. And apparently this has already happened 3 times. With the Iran strike in 2024, the UT strikes. And now again, someone just knew the attacks were coming and deliberately placed bets on the prediction markets. So very, very interesting. No idea. It could just be a coincidence. But we've seen time and again in the past that insider information has been used to make so-called illegal trades here. But we also have some very, very positive news here. A $1.6 billion company, Studio Angel, is buying 300 Bitcoin and launching the Bitcoin Treasury Company, selling fiat for digital gold. Let's do this. And we can see that more and more treasury companies are popping up. More and more, and even more. At this point, you really have to wonder, is there any company left that isn't a treasury company? And here David Bailey also says, there are over 80 different capital markets worldwide. That means 80 Bitcoin treasury companies. That's 80 CEOs going door to door, raising capital in every local currency to buy Bitcoin. We are unstoppable. Bitcoin to 1 million. And that's the long-term perspective you always have to keep in mind. We still have massive demand. Sure, there are a few paper hands selling, but honestly, there really aren't that many paper hands left in the market. We can see that, otherwise the Bitcoin price would have dropped much further. We've already had the massive flash outs, at least at the current price level, from what it looks like. Otherwise, I could have imagined that Bitcoin would have fallen much further here. And these are also massive developments here. Here, JP Morgan reports that the first quarter of 2025 was one of the best periods for publicly listed Bitcoin mining companies. So now we have positive coverage from JP Morgan about Bitcoin. And we all remember, you have to make a distinction with Jamie Dimon. Jamie Dimon and JP Morgan. Jamie Dimon says here, or he used to say, that Bitcoin is really, really bad. He still says Bitcoin isn't good. But he also says that just like he doesn't want to ban smoking, he doesn't want to ban Bitcoin either. Now, as the CEO, Jamie Dimon is offering Bitcoin purchases through JP Morgan. They are now offering Bitcoin-backed loans, where you can use Bitcoin as collateral. And they are also putting out positive Bitcoin reports, saying that Bitcoin mining companies are currently doing really, really well. And that's definitely a dramatic turnaround, from being an enemy, a critic, an opponent. Now suddenly, hey, we can make a lot of money with Bitcoin. Now we're launching our own Bitcoin. It's already a fly. We're launching our own Bitcoin offering now. That's definitely a big deal, if you asked me. There was also a funny story here, actually. Matthew Siegel posted this. It's really quite amazing that Bloomberg is now putting out daily bearish Bitcoin posts. They're actually saying here that Bitcoin could trigger a recession. Gold versus crypto. And that's what Mike McClune is saying here. I know he actually reported positively about Bitcoin at some point, I think. But here, yeah, it doesn't really seem like he's reporting so positively. No, wait, crap. I think I'm mixing him up. I think I even made a video about him once. I'd have to check. He already issued some kind of warning or something like that in the past. So sorry. I think I really did mix him up. Sorry. And now I found a clip here that you absolutely have to check out. People who are still unsure about the current situation. People who don't know right now. Should I sell? Should I stop? Please watch the clip and then take another look at the whole situation with fresh eyes.
Hey man, just curious, why don't you own Bitcoin? Because I like working overtime while watching my savings buy me less every year.
Ma'am, any reason you haven't bought Bitcoin?
Well, I enjoy being humbled by double-digit inflation and $100 shampoo.
Hi there, mind if I ask why you don't own any Bitcoin?
Because I would hate to accidentally afford college for my kids one day.
Quick question, why don't you own Bitcoin?
Because watching my paycheck buy less and less is the only thing keeping me awake on night shifts.
This is not investment advice. Of course, you have to decide for yourselves what you do with your money. But honestly, that's just how it feels. In this clip, it's basically about people being interviewed and asked, hey, why don't you buy Bitcoin? And then they say, well, I don't buy Bitcoin because I'd rather have money that's constantly losing value to inflation. I'd rather keep working more and more. I'd rather not be able to afford college or even school for my kids. I'd rather not be able to afford a good life here. I'd rather be stuck in my shop. I'd rather have to work overtime, basically slave away, without really getting anything out of it in the end. And a lot of people, for example, actually don't want to be healthy. They don't want to be rich. They don't want to be wealthy at all. And these are sometimes subconscious patterns that we have. Because the thing is, for example, when we're healthy, we actually get less attention. No one asks anymore if we're okay. No one checks in on us, and so on. There are so many people who, for that reason, don't actually want to get healthy. Or if we're poor, then we're stuck in a victim mentality. And we can meet up with our other victim friends, with a Schnitzelpeter and a bratwurst trade, in a bar, and philosophize with them about why the world is so crappy and why life sucks, and so on. And that's why you really have to make a switch here. This often happens on a subconscious level. You have to shift from sickness to health, from poverty to wealth, from being a slave to prosperity, from being dependent to being self-sovereign. And these are also patterns that we partly pick up from society, from our families, and yes, from our friends. You really have to be careful about that, because it happens on subtle levels, and that's portrayed so brilliantly in this clip. So if you want prosperity here, if you want wealth, if you want more time, if you want more energy, if you want, more power, then take a look. At least check out Bitcoin. If you want to buy Bitcoin, I'll put a link below to 21 Bitcoin. There, you can buy Bitcoin really easily and simply. Use the code Bitcoin Hotel. You can get up to 20% off the fees when buying Bitcoin. It's an absolute recommendation from me. And guys, I'll see you. Until then, peace out.